There's a delightful story about a young lady who was on a cruise ship, and she kept glancing at an attractive young man who was a couple tables away from her. And he couldn't help but notice her attention, and he finally got the courage up to approach her. And he said, "Pardon me," with a slight little smile. "It may be my imagination, but I couldn't help but notice that you keep looking in my direction. Is there something wrong?" She blushed and said demurely, "Oh, no, I just can't help but notice that you resemble my first husband." And the young man looked puzzled and said, "How many times have you been married?" And she said, "Oh, I haven't been yet." I like her attitude. We are told that when the famous painter Whistler was first married, he was very poor. All the furniture he and his new bride had was their bed. But throughout their modest little home, they had chalked drawings on the floor with detailed descriptions of the furniture that they wanted and that they knew was to come. They had no money, but what they did is they had an abundant mindset. They had their imagination, and it was intact. And they did what both of these stories actually show, is that faith is a verb. It shows action. So they also knew that what Holmes defines faith as a mental attitude so inwardly embodied that the mind can no longer deny it. I'm going to say that again. Faith is a mental attitude so inwardly embodied that the mind can no longer deny it. Now, I have no doubt that that young woman and that young man were married sometime after that cruise. The story actually reminds me of Rowena Belcher's story. I don't know how many of you remember her. She was my secretary over at Chico New Thought. I loved that woman. We drove up and down the hill for 16 years from Paradise to the Chico Church, and that 3 times a week. But that's how she and her husband met. I could tell you stories of what a great metaphysician this woman was, because she knew that her faith set her free to experience whatever she wanted to have in her life, and she got it. I believe that faith is a belief in the presence of an invisible principle and law that directly and specifically responds to us. So, with that, these two couples must have known also Paul's definition of faith, which is, faith is the substance of things hoped for, as it was the substance of things which have come to pass. And it is the evidence of things not seen. Things not seen. How many of you have demonstrated an idea that you had never seen before, but yet you had the idea? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. See, we're shy. I know that we've all done that. All of us have done that. May not have recognized it. But once you, well, let me ask you this. How many of you ever made up your mind about something? Uh-huh. And then it happened. Now, that can bring results in different ways, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, we have faith is the substance of things hoped for, and actually, Dr. Holmes really doesn't like the word hope. what we could say instead of that is faith is the substance of things known in your mind, as it was the substance of things which have come to pass. So it's demonstrated, because once it's known in mind, it has to come to pass. Because it's the evidence of things not seen. It has to be an idea in your mind before anything can come out into being. Now, someone has also said that only he who can see the invisible can do the impossible. If you can see in your mind that which is not out here, then impossible things have been done. And we can look back through history and watch the progress of humanity and the ideas that have come forth that nobody knew were possible. And of course now we just keep creating more and more. I mean, if you bought a computer yesterday, by next week it'll be out of date. There'll be something different, something new, something better. Because there's always a better idea. Bringing forth what we thought was impossible before. Now the dictionary defines faith as unquestioning belief. Unquestioning belief in God. And the third definition is anything believed. Now that third definition is the kicker. That's the one that gets us into trouble. Anything believed is demonstrated. And anything that is believed that we demonstrate can be a negative. Because anything believed is we can be very positive in our negativity. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, darn, I knew that was going to happen. What does that sound like? Sounds like something awful happened, right? But why did it happen? Because they knew. There was fear around it. There's something set in their mind that they couldn't accept the good. So there's a settling for something less than. So I have a little poem that alludes to that trouble, anything believed. Of course, it can be something very positive too, we all know that. But this is the little poem. It says, a traveler crossed a frozen stream in trembling fear one day. Later, a teamster drove across and whistled all the way. Great faith and little faith alike were granted safe convoy. One had pangs of needless fear, the other all the joy. So it depends on your state of mind. You know, Dr. Holmes says heaven and hell are states of consciousness. So the person who crossed the frozen stream and whistled all the way was in heaven at that moment. Heaven is the state of mind, right where you are. And the other who had needless pangs of fear, oh my gosh, the ice is going to give away any time. I'll drown. I'll never be able to make it across. Or whatever is the driving force that takes you away from the faith that could set you free from the fear, it takes all the joy away. There is no joy. So we need to whistle while we work. And because if you're happy, you can't be sad at the same time. Now, granted, it's not easy. Simple, but not easy. So the unquestioned belief in God as faith will always do one of these two things. It will free us from the trouble we fear, or it will give us the strength and the courage to meet trouble if it comes. If it comes, we'll have the courage. If we have a belief and faith and trust in a higher power, that we're always one in that power, that with God all things are possible. So unquestioned belief in God, once we know the universal principles and how they work, leads us to seeing beyond the appearances. You see, we have to see beyond what is in front of us. The newspapers, the headlines, all the trouble in the world that's going on. If we get involved in that, and what do? We become one of the fearmongers. We add to the world's tribulation. And Jesus the Christ said, I am not of the world. I am not of the world. Meaning, he's not of the tribulation that's in the world. He has risen in his consciousness to see beyond that truth. Now, when he did all of his healings, he knew beforehand, before he even did anything, he asked the lame man to get up and walk. He said to the person with the crippled hand that wanted to be healed, stretch forth your hand. Now, that man couldn't have done that if Jesus had not known his truth. But the man did something. He showed action because he believed that Jesus could heal him. And that's what we as practitioners do. We're knowing your truth in our own minds, but because we're all using the one mind, it will affect your mind if you're receptive to that truth. We need to be receptive to the faith of God. So, if we are able to see beyond the appearances, that leads us to believing before we seeing. And then, have you ever heard the remark, she has blind faith? Do you know what that means? That means this exactly. That you believe it before you see it. You're blind to the outside world. Not literally, of course. But in your mind, you don't let outside appearances affect the way that you're thinking, and especially the way that you're feeling. Because it's the feeling side of life where the action of God has to take place. Now again, it's not an easy task to have unquestioned belief in a power greater than we are, but it is possible to shift our awareness and discover what we truly believe. If those beliefs are limiting and binding, not setting us free to be the greatness God intended, then those patterns of belief need to be changed. And it's possible to change your belief. So, how do you do that? Well, I really worked on this and thought, how do I change my belief? And so I have 5 different things that I work with when I need to change a belief. So what we need to know is, first of all, you don't have to create more faith. We already have faith. It's the faith of God. We're whole and complete in the mind of God with every attribute that God has. So, what we do is we misplace our faith. If there's not enough love, money, jobs, relationship, harmony, or ideas to go around, then we say, woe is me. Ain't it awful? I don't have enough. I've run out of the money at the end of the month. And then Ernest Holmes writes on page 209, the student should take time every day to see his life as he wishes it to be, to make a mental picture of his ideal. He should pass this picture over to the law and go about his business with a calm assurance that on the inner side of life, something is taking place. There should not be any sense of hurry or worry about this, just a calm, peaceful sense of reality. Let the law work through and express itself in the experience. So, with that said, working with the law, you let the law do the work. You have to point the way. This is what I want. And then let go. It's probably the hardest part. Now, the second thing is you have to sell yourself on the idea that you are the action of God in human form. God is not in you like a raisin in a bun. We are the wholeness of the bun, and yet look how many buns there are. I mean, well, I didn't mean to. I spelled it B-U-N-S. So